All right, folks, what do we have here for question number 2? Cloud, is it real or blowing in the wind? I'm going to come to you in just a minute. I want to start with table 10, I think it is. Yes, table 10. I had a chance to dip into that conversation, and I really liked what was going on there. And so who's the table host at table 10? I see Yvette, but you're not a host.
No, Isaac, right here.
Isaac?
Isaac.
How are you?
I'm all right. Thanks for eavesdropping in our conversation.
Thank you for allowing me to do it.
Something made me think that you were going to call on us.
Well, yeah, so what made me think about what was going on there was just...
The suit?
Well, that's part of it.
Okay.
What really made me interested in the conversation that was going on at your table was when you were talking about some of the work that you're doing within FDIC to ascertain what your people who are out in the field need and how that fits with what you're able to do and what you're willing to do in a cloud environment. That's what I think would be useful for other people to think about, both in other government agencies and in the vendor community that want to sell you stuff. And your colleagues in government.
I honestly can't remember what we were talking about.
So
the rule. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
when you have your people out on the road and they're out, you're working not just with the other people inside the agency, you're working with the banks to try to ascertain bandwidth for your folks to be able to get online and be able to communicate. That's
okay,
the piece that I was in that I thought was the most
I'm still sleepy, so.
I hear you.
The Voyagers class was just really.
Was it lit as the kids say?
Lit, yeah, lit. Yeah. Epic, right? Lit. Oh yeah. Okay. No, what we were talking. Well, we were surrounding the conversation about cloud and the adoption of cloud and so on and so forth, and understanding that a lot of agencies have. We always talk about mobile, and one of the things that we were talking about, and something that I tell vendors all the time, being from the industry as well in the past, is that you really need to know their business. Right, you really need to know what they're doing out there. So one of the things, the examples that he was saying, that we at the FDIC, we have mobile workforce. We have examiners that go out there and they examine banks. That's what they do. But they're very mobile. They're not in the office. They have to be out there in the banks, constantly talking to them. Now, one of the problems that we were talking about, one of the questions that came up was, hey, with the cloud adoption and being in these different areas, how does that affect you? Well, I was telling him that, yeah, in some of these rural areas, the bandwidth is not there, not like a metropolitan area of New York or DC or so on and so forth. So we equip them with laptops, we equip them with MiFis, but the problem is there that you have the MiFi, and depending on whether you're Verizon or AT&T or what have you, depends on the level of bandwidth. So obviously, one of the things that we also talked about, and I think this is where he was pointing at, that your shift changes, and something that you have to remember when you go cloud, you may have an Exchange on-prem bunch of servers. You know, I can tell you that we have like 34 of them that we're transferring now. And once you go to the cloud, whether you use Google, there's only 2 of them, Google and Office 365, your shift changes to, now my email is not down. Now if my link goes down, not only did my email goes down, it's my ServiceNow goes down, my Salesforce goes down, my other products. So it's really switching it, and it's something that you really have to pay attention to. And one of the things that we were talking about was trying to work with our customers, who are the banks, and seeing what can we do to help that out, whether it's the local government in the states, or whether it's with them to say, okay, what can we do to provide that and help our customers out? So that's what we're looking at and talking about.
Okay, and that's I think the reason I think that is so useful is because that's a real life use case scenario.
Absolutely. That
you have a guy at your table, Jay. Can you give the mic to Jay Huey from GSA?
He's really
I mean, this is your deal. This is your thing. So what should he do?
Yeah, so I'm the cloud portfolio lead for TTS within GSA, and I think a lot about these challenges and the new paradigms that cloud enables, right? So the example of MiFis and access I like, you know, FirstNet, it's about bandwidth for cities, and so I love this idea of like government could sponsor a bank to have free Wi-Fi for customers, so when the federal environment goes in there, you know, the bandwidth that we need is there. But also the paradigms for cloud, it's not just lifting and shifting an email server. Does anyone know how Uber backs up their data center for Coop and DR? It's to their drivers' mobile phones, right? So I can imagine your regulators using an app that just doesn't need connectivity, and then when it gets back into a metropolitan zone, it syncs back up. And we have these algorithms, now there's modern research for this, but it is just this new paradigm shift that takes us a little bit farther down the rabbit hole.
Thanks a lot for that, and that I think is a great answer, or a great conversation starter at least, for point A. How do we leverage to improve service to the citizens? Laura over here, who do we have at table 5? You look surprised, sir.
Not at all, just reaching for the mic.
Okay, good.
So we're talking a little bit about the security here and how do we utilize that and what does that mean? It's pretty obvious and has been for some time that government isn't that good at securing its own data. And that's unfortunate. If you were one of those people who got one of those lovely letters from OPM, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you even got 2. It's pretty exciting. So what do we do about this and how do we utilize cloud? Well, the intelligence community has already done a lot of the footwork there. And if their data can be protected, and we're not talking about all their data, but a fair amount of it can be protected in the cloud, and those security concerns can be dealt with there, I find it difficult to believe, as do my colleagues at the table, that the rest of the civilian government community cannot find appropriate security solutions within the cloud. There is a level of resistance that comes in a couple of different ways. One of them is financial. A lot of the agencies have working capital funds, which are tied back eventually to billets and collections, right? And those support the network engineers and the others who have a career interest in maintaining the hardware on site and the facilities that support government data now. But that doesn't need to stay that way forever. It might take time to change it. But ultimately, it seems we should stop competing with the private sector in this area and move as much as possible to the cloud in a reasonable way. It's just a better way to mitigate the risk when you think about it. So that was kind of what the table came up with there. As far as specific security solutions, those really have a lot more to do with the type of data you're protecting and are kind of outside of the scope of what we could discuss in the short period of time we had available.
You can take as long as you want. I mean, none of us will be here, but you can take as long as you want to work out the challenges. Thank you for that input. Over here, sorry, promised you I would come to you after 10. Sorry.
You let me down, Francis.
Well,
Sorry.
That's how I roll.
Okay, well, this is how I roll. So we talked about a couple things about the cloud. The first question we talked about the leveraging was kind of you move to the cloud for the de facto reasons, meaning you move systems to the cloud, and that way you're able to take resources and apply them to other projects. It's not like people think cloud means losing jobs. It does not. It means that you manage your systems and your people better in a way that provides the best value for the organization. We also talked about the low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of systems that have very low data, public data, that they're easy to get to the cloud. And if the agencies can make a push to do that, that helps them with other systems down the road. It kind of gives them that cloud momentum. But I really want to talk about the second question, because we couldn't get to 3 and to 4 because question number 2, we were having a good debate over here. We were talking about what can we do to secure it for the government. One of the things we came up with outside the box was, how about hack yourself? Just get someone to come in and hack all your systems, and if they find something, great. If they don't, that means you're secure. It's just a way to keep yourself secure if a breach occurs or something like that. We also talked about, and this is kind of like the heated question we had at our table, was if I'm the government and I go to a private sector company, they're in the cloud, and my data gets hacked, should we hold that company accountable? Half of us said yes, half of us said no. Of course, the government said yes, the industry said no. So, so
shocking.
It just shocked me. So we talked about one thing that our friend over here at GSA said was having cyber insurance marketplace in play. That way we can ensure that data is secure and follow the procedures. That's just some ideas that we came up with. And then, of course, this is basic, but it also applies to anything we ever do is the risk. What are the risks of having the data out there? when I was our CIO at the time at DOT said, I only can secure so much data, so I have to concentrate on the data that's most important to keep secure, and then everything else I kind of have to see what happens, because not everything, you can't safeguard everything 100%. You have to kind of, I guess, pick and choose your battles. So that's what our perspective was.
I think you've also come up with the new insult, which is to tell someone to go hack himself. Which you can actually say in a room like this, which
Can we tweet that out?
somebody I'm sure will.
Okay.
They're doing it right now. The Defense Department did a bug bounty program last summer, I think, and the Army has done one. GSA is starting one, I believe. Is that right? Jay? Do we know? Is there anybody in the room that was involved with either the DoD or the Army's hackathon? Okay, so that's a great idea, and I keep hearing that the success of the DoD and Army's hackathons means that we'll see more of those, that we'll start to see a kind of a critical mass of those. Who else on? How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So we talked about, it depends on what agency you're with, but with GSA, they basically have all their applications in the cloud. So it was depending upon where you are, infrastructure as a service seems to be the standard that everybody is moving towards. But the next step is, can we get software as a service in there? So we have Oracle here, and they're working on doing that. But how can agencies leverage that and make sure they're actually getting the best of all the applications that are out there, as opposed to just the infrastructure? So they've taken step one, but can we move to step 2 and 3, which is platform as a service and software as a service? And then a lot of smaller companies are providing software, but do they actually have to get it FedRAMPed? Can I just put it on a FedRAMPed infrastructure as a service, or can I just go with the FISMA moderate, which has a lot less controls than FedRAMP does? So a lot of considerations there as they're moving, as agencies think about that. Don't put so much focus on FedRAMP for the software as well as instead of just the hardware.
Excellent.
Can I add to that?
Oh, Steve?
Sure, just real quick. The other challenges that we were talking about at this table involved some of the contracting models and the pricing models, which agencies are still struggling to figure out in some cases, and in some cases the struggle is that things are changing and continuing to evolve in the commercial markets. Some of the ideas that came up here was to look at other somewhat analogous models, either in terms of telecom or even help desk and other areas where surge capabilities or month-by-month pricing has already been figured out, and see how we can leverage some of those concepts.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks for that, Steve. What I wonder is if there's a government person that wants to talk about maybe some success stories in getting rid of the resistance. We've heard a lot about what would be desirable services, and there are tons of people in this room and beyond that have developed great services that agencies could leverage or should leverage. The question is, are they? And if they're not, what has had to happen to push that through? Do we have anybody that has talked about that at their tables, or maybe who hasn't but wants to say something about it? Because if all of this stuff is available and people don't use it, then it doesn't really matter what's available. No one. Here in the front. I guess technically I'm in the back, so.
Hi, Kevin Coyne, Department of Commerce.
Hi.
So one of the things we talked about is, as a business, does your business know your cost model? So I know technology business management just got rolled out through CPIC, and it's coming up for FY19, 20, 21 and beyond in terms of how we report, but we're looking to apply that taxonomy in the cost model. So if you don't really understand what your business requirement is and what that application is doing and what's it consuming, it's really hard for you as a business owner to understand what your cloud requirement is. Because we have a lot of our applications that reside on-prem, and you want to switch it over to a cloud, but if you don't know what that application is consuming, it's really hard to get a good estimate. So you've got to go back, I think, to the business owner and say, okay, what's our cost model? What's it take to provision one new user? What's that cost? And if you can't answer that question, I think it's really hard to assess what your cloud readiness is and really what you're trying to do. So I think having that solution and looking to apply, I think, better solutions architecture, enterprise architecture, bringing it back from the business user all the way down to the application owner to the CFO to the CIO and be able to speak the same language via TBM is a really good way to do that and to help drive adoption. I think that's going to help further government better solutions.
Do you have a sense that we're finally at a point where it's only the business case and the dollars that will, or the other elements of a business case that will drive those decisions? Are we still kind of where my sense is we were 2, 3, 4 years ago, where people still just want to hug servers whenever possible?
I think the challenge, one thing is just being able to speak the same language with the CFO, because you have budget analysts, I give them a requirement like, yeah, you've got the money, here you go. As opposed to like, what was that requirement validated against? Why do we buy it? What's the reason we're buying this? And the CFOs, I think, have to ask better questions, and the CIOs have to be able to respond, and be able to speak the same language as the CFO. Otherwise, we're all going to suffer, I think, as a whole until we can kind of level set. So I'm hoping that the TBM initiative that OMB is driving will help further us along in that conversation.
Thank you very much for taking that question on. Another table over here, 13, lucky 13. Maria. Let me guess, you did whatever you wanted.
Damn straight.
Ah! Yeah. What you got?
So, you talked about services. Is anybody providing those services? At SBA, I've made no secret that we do have a big lift as far as modernizing and doing all of those things. And several of the things that I'm doing is repositioning SBA so that the CIO is positioned to provide those services. Are we providing those today? No. But it's about turning the organization around. I have to start from the bottom, modernizing, moving to the cloud, upgrading, shutting down a data center, doing all of those things. But in the long run, it's about providing the services, because when I look out over the next year, 2.5 years, and talk about things like unified communications, and I mentioned this at the table, for those folks that are in the middle of Montana that have 5 hours of drive time to get to a district office or somewhere that provides services for SBA, when you talk about services, I have to be able to enable that unified communication solution so that somebody can Skype in and get to an office anywhere, anytime within the country, whether it's in Florida or maybe they want to talk to their local Montana office. I don't know, but enabling those services. So what we're doing at SBA is turning that around, moving in that direction to be able to provide those kind of services for unified communications, enable that business, to be able to spin up if they need to do something, and really take that enterprise approach across SBA so that as the business requirements are coming in, we can provide those. So we're not there yet, but we're moving in that direction.
And what I think is encouraging about that, though, is that when you came in there, and you're right, you talked about the work that you had to do, but you made it very clear from the beginning, and this is the leadership element that we talked about earlier, you made it very clear how you were going to do that there was not going to be an interim layer. You were moving to the cloud, and that was the end of it, and that's the right decision. But that's what I kind of was getting at, that I'm not sure I see everywhere. The vendors are providing the services, and the vendors are making them available, but it's incumbent on your colleagues to choose to deliver them throughout the rest of the agency. And that's what I'm not sure when we get to point D, how mature is your agency's adoption of cloud? That's where I wasn't sure we had really gotten to yet.
Yeah, and when you look, I've been at other federal agencies, the business is already moving that direction. They're using cloud services, right? How do I facilitate that? And how am I more efficient? How am I spending those dollars better? And helping the business spend those dollars better, because even at SBA that's not that big, there's pockets of stuff all over the place. Great, how do we bring that together and really get the more for our money, if you will?
Is your challenge as much building a strategy then to put all of that together as actually implementing the services themselves?
Yes, it's all of that, and it's the workforce too. Here's the direction we're going. I need everybody on the bus. I got a couple of folks that still have a foot on the first step. They're not quite on the bus yet, but this is the direction we're going, and here's where we're headed. I could not do that without the CFO, without the leadership at SBA behind us to be able to do that, and then the workforce as well. There's a lot of training and retraining that needs to happen.
That's great input. Thank you very much, Maria. Anybody else on cloud? Cloud, going once, going twice. All right, so let's take a couple of minutes and the table host shift again for the final time. And we'll go to question 3 about security.